Hi, I'm Tom Hunt, the Conservative Party for candidate for Ipswich. This is the fourth podcast I'm running. I've actually ended up having a slightly longer conversation before this podcast started, so I'm pretty confident we've still got a lot of things still to cover. So earlier today, I was lucky to meet with your Chief Constable.
Right.
He covered a number of issues. This is definitely a day when we're discussing crime a lot.
Quite.
Crime and social behaviour, something which really concerns people in Ipswich, particularly in certain parts of Ipswich, knife crime, county lines, and also a perception of whether people feel safe, particularly at night as well. So thanks a lot for your time as the elected Police and Crime Commissioner, who has a key role to play. You are the public's voice when it comes to police in Suffolk and Ipswich. So thank you for coming in. So first things first, I've got some set questions here, but I think that these questions were actually put together a few days ago, but since then, we've obviously had the news we've got a new Prime Minister, we've had the news that we've got a new Cabinet, a new Home Secretary, a new Justice Secretary. So I just wanted to know what your views are on what you've seen so far.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted that Boris is now our Prime Minister. I voted for him because I think the country has suffered over the last 3 or 4 years with a despondence air, sort of doom and gloom, and if there's anybody who can lift our spirits a bit, or to a large extent, that's Boris. And I think the new team he's got is very, very refreshing, because we've had years of difficulty. We had to get the budget deficit under control. That's absolutely essential. As Conservatives, we believe in sound money, but we also, I think, have lost our way, which isn't acceptable, of key issues that should be in any Conservative DNA, and that's law and order, supporting the police and defence, as well as a sound economy. And in many ways, the three of them will go together. So the announcement of an extra 20,000 police officers, which has just come out in the last couple of days, is to be applauded. I've just done an interview where they said, well, it's going to be a challenge, and I said, well, yes, it will be a challenge, but I'd much rather have this challenge than the negative one about finding further economies of scale and so on. So we look forward to this with great anticipation. I hope we will be able to get a decent share of that extra money for policing here in Suffolk. That's what we need to work hard at. And of course, that directly affects Ipswich, our county town, the biggest population centre in the county. So if overall we looked at Suffolk, if we were to be able to afford an extra 100 or so officers on top of what we've already got, if you think that Ipswich is roughly a sixth of our population, you could rationally say, well, maybe we get an extra 15 to 20 officers here in our county town. So that's what we're looking for. And then we've got that capacity to do much more to deal with some of the deep problems that we've got here.
But of course it's not, because I actually had the opportunity to discuss with Boris Johnson a few weeks ago these issues. And because I like you, I welcome the commitment for 20,000 new officers, but I also welcome some of the other things he said, particularly on sentencing. And if you're found guilty of a serious crime, say, and you get 25 years in prison, you actually serve 25 years in prison, as opposed to being let out automatically halfway through, not even based on good behaviour. And also what he said about carrying a bladed weapon. And if you're caught twice, you get automatic custodial sentence. I think it's many of the things that I thought can make an improvement, he's come out with already. What do you think about Priti Patel as the Home Secretary?
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I've met her, and I think she certainly knows that personal and business security, being you young or old or whatever it is actually fundamental. It's one of the key ways that we live and work in this country, and obviously here in Ipswich. If you are not safe and secure at home or at work or at school, or if you're retired, we have a serious problem. We're really lucky in the UK that we police by consent, and I think that's something we should remember. And certainly as a PCC, I'm always saying this, we do have the best policing in the world. It's used as an exemplar globally, it's the gold standard. After all, we invented it. It was a Conservative Home Secretary, Robert Peel, back in 1828, with his principles of policing, which still hold true today. Clearly you can interpret them differently, but the basic principles are the same. And it's that relationship with the public are the police, and the police are the public, that is just as true today. Now, the pattern of crime has changed, it's become more complex, we've got new sorts of crime that we never had before, a lot more now cyber-enabled or cyber-dependent. You may be interested to know that 96% of the crime here in Suffolk has got some kind of digital footprint. So we've got to be geared up to make sure you can analyse the data on people's mobiles, their watches, iPads, desktops, whatever else it happens to be, because that provides a lot of crucial evidence for bringing criminals to justice, prosecuting them, and convicting them. Now, I reiterate your point you made, Tom. It really is about time that we looked at our criminal justice system as a whole. I chair the local criminal justice board. A key role for police and crime commissioners is to focus on the needs of victims, not the perpetrators. Clearly we've got work to do with them to stop reoffending and so on. But I'm seriously concerned that over the last few years the threat of prosecution has diminished too much so that it ceases to act as a deterrent. You know, when I was a when I was a young man, 3 light years ago, the fact of the matter was that if you got caught and you risked that prosecution, you knew you were in trouble. Nowadays, it's gone too far the other way. I think we're far too liberal in our approach to this. I'm not, by the way, a hang 'em and flog 'em merchant, but I do think if people are caught, they deserve a second chance, but that's it. That doesn't mean you have a third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance. So my view is people who are convicted of knife crime, drug pushers, those who lead the sex gangs and these sort of things, we say, right, Fred, you have a chance. We're going to draw a line in the sand here. Either you reform or we're going to make your life hell. Prison will work and we'll make your life damned uncomfortable. And when I say you give them a second chance, they've got to have that approach in their mind. They're going to change and make amends. They owe society something back. We've got to stop wet sentencing. These guys do need support. We've got to have a degree of compassion that many of them don't have the opportunities when they were younger. They come from difficult home background or chaotic or whatever the modern parlance is. But actually helping them, and that means good education, training, jobs and prospects at homes where they can live. And they need to be supported so they know if they veer off that path that we're helping them with, and that'll be a lot of money for the public to put into that, then they're going to get punished severely. So it's like a carrot and stick approach. You've got to be cruel to be kind. And one old thing that Churchill said, and funny enough Michael Gove said this when I heard him speak some time ago. Churchill did say, there is a jewel in the heart of every man, if only you can find it. Now, my role as a PCC is to not necessarily find it myself, but to help facilitate the agencies and so on to do that, and I'm sure we can be successful, but we've got to be clear where the boundaries are, and I think that's been missed over perhaps the last 20 years.
So I think in the case of sort of like giving somebody a second chance but no more, I guess you can apply that to sort of being caught for playing a weapon. So for example, if somebody was caught for playing a weapon once, you drag them in and they say, for example, look, I absolutely didn't plan to use it, but I live in a rough part of town and I had it in possession, for self-defence. But then if the message is clearly communicated, it's never acceptable to possess a weapon, and the solution to you feeling insecure is not to resort to having to carry one around. So we'll let you off this one time, but never again. If I carry it again a second and a third time, then you have to take action. And what's your view about stop and search? Because obviously, when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London, my understanding is he was generally in favour of it being used. Theresa May had a slightly different approach to it. I understand here also there's a sensitivity around whether it's been, there's been a profile and things like that. So I just wanted to know what your...
One of the things, we look at this in depth twice a year. I hold the Chief Constable to account for operational matters, and in reality, of course, it's the whole of our police force, and I use the word force as opposed to police service, because that resonates with me, police force. And we look at all the stop and search data. I'd like to say straight away, it is a legitimate operational policing tactic, and it's one that they use. They're the professionals, so we don't need any political interference in this. It's got to be held down within the law. We have a track record here in Suffolk of being one of the best examples in the whole country. It was used as an example of best practice by the inspector at HMRC, I think 4 or 5 years ago, how to do it. So with our colleagues in ISCRI, the Ipswich and Suffolk Racial Equality Unit, cases are dip sampled. We dip sample it from our team back in the office, Police and Crime Commissioner office. And where mistakes are made, they are analysed thoroughly. Everybody looks at the evidence and lessons are learned. It sort of comes back into the learning process. But no, that should never be dropped, and we use it. One of the other things that we've got to improve the communication on, you'd be quite surprised when we look at the data. We did this, I think it was just over a month ago, our accountability and performance panel meetings. There are a surprising number of people who are stopped and searched, and when you find out where they come from, they don't come from Suffolk at all. This relates back to county lines and the drugs trade and so on. There are people who wish to have bad effects on Suffolk. And our job, and mine certainly as police commissioner, is to make sure we've got the right equipment, tactics, policing resources available to put a ring of steel around the county and keep these beggars out, because we don't want them here, and they need to be caught, punished, and severely punished actually if they're found guilty. And of course, stop and search is a perfectly legitimate and an essential tactic for keeping people safe.
So I think it's one of the things I said to Boris Johnson when I met him is I said, look, it's not often you hear me quoting Tony Blair's slogans, but I said one slogan I find it difficult to disagree with is the importance of being tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. I find it difficult to disagree with that.
Well, yes, but up to a point, and I'll tell you why I say that, because I've learnt a huge amount, and I've been an editor now for nearly 7 years, believe it or not, but when he says tough on the causes, that was a damn good soundbite, but where was the action underneath it? And let me explain why. So, if we look at Ipswich, which is what we're here to talk about today, you have some people, some areas, Castle Hill, North Ipswich, very comfortably off and so on, and yet at the same time, and being a Suffolk lad for nearly 60 years, I know Ipswich extremely well, there are areas that have just been left behind with the decline in manufacturing, the decline in the docks, and they've got a beautiful waterfront because of thousands of jobs there. All of those have gone, and what has actually been there to replace them? So one of the causes of crime actually is a lack of opportunity, economic deprivation, lack of social mobility. Now, what did Tony Blair ever do about that? He certainly talked about it a lot, but I've yet to see what Tony Blair ever achieved, and that's what I mean.
Well, rest assured, I wasn't saying.
Oh no!
I just thought the slogan.
As a slogan, I agree.
Yeah, as a slogan.
So if you unpick it, then I know you're absolutely right, Tom. I agree. So what are we doing? This is what we need to be doing here in Ipswich. Let's have some big regeneration programmes for some of the estates. White House, Chantry, Witton. There's some really good people live there. They really are. But they need a bit more hope, a bit more investment, improve the housing stock, leisure and amenity facilities, greening of the area and so on. There's all sorts of things we could do. It's actually quite an exciting prospect. I just do not understand why there hasn't been the leadership here from the various agencies, the Borough Council and others, to get a hold of these issues and deal with it. Can't do it overnight, you can't boil the ocean, but for God's sake, let's make a start.
When I was last Friday, I did a podcast with Isaac Codger, who's the youth MP for Ipswich, who's I think a really impressive young man who's been spoken in Parliament about knife crime as well, and he has some views on this, and we touched upon it. But what have you been doing with regards to sort of young people in Ipswich? Have you been any involvement with trying to?
A lot actually. I found it deeply shocking, very sad actually, when we had that dreadful stabbing just over a year ago, back in June of last year, that a life, whatever the issues, has been taken away from us at the age of 17, 18. It's dreadful. And I've found a lot in the last 7 years that very clear link between deprivation and high levels of abuse, addiction, crime, antisocial behaviour. So the obvious answer is, how do we put that right? And it's long-term solutions, economic regeneration, jobs, etc. But in the short term, one of the things a lot of people have said to me, well, there's nothing for young people to do. That's not factually quite correct, but of course it's access to the information, the knowledge. Is it on the doorstep? If you have people from a difficult background, then maybe they haven't got the transport, the inclination, the knowledge. So we, as part of our role in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioning, we do a lot of commissioning grants for crime disorder and reduction, as well as commissioning, it's one of key responsibility for the victims of crime. So, and young people, of course, can be victims of crime as well. When you come to the gangs culture, you've also got that debate, are they a victim or are they a criminal? And the answer can, I'm afraid, be sometimes it's both. So what have we got to do to help young people? Give them a range of activities to do to keep them occupied. We've got to make sure they go to school, but of course those who have other activities, extracurricular activities, they like to do better. I used to run a scout week for 25 years up in North Suffolk, so I know with young people you can do that. So we've put a lot of our commissioning in to help particularly those young people who are less fortunate, difficult backgrounds. So we've worked with the Bangladeshi Support Centre, wonderful people there. They're a secular group, it's not a question of whether you have to
and they help all sorts of different communities. It's not just the Bangladesh.
Yes, right. So they've helped a lot of people in the Norwich Road area. With our friends in Inspire Suffolk, another wonderful charity based over near Nacton at Lindbergh Road. We work with Volunteering Matters, who are based at the old courthouse here in Ipswich. They've done a lot for young people, particularly girls who are being sexually exploited dealing with violence, sexual abuse and so on, 4YP, dealing with those who, from their sexuality, happen to be gay, lesbian, whatever, doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned, they can become victims of crime. Positive Future is a great organisation. It works all over the county. We give them £85,000 a year and they organise activities. A lot of them are based around sport, but not entirely. And I'm a great believer, if you give youngsters purpose in life, it helps. There is an alternative to violence, gangs and drugs. So, and we've got this new fund that we've just launched back at the beginning of July, £150,000. That's £50,000 of our public money. And I'm just amazed, we do it with the Suffolk Community Foundation, it's been matched by over £100,000 of donations from individuals. Some really generous people in Suffolk, because they care about the future of young people. And on a longer scale, what I'd like to do is see if we can work together to get going business clubs for work experience and so on, the job opportunities. We should be using public sector procurement to provide jobs and apprenticeships.
There's also a big point about how we still, there's been lots of talk from government on more importance of apprenticeships and prominent role for apprenticeships. But a view that I have is we've got to go much further.
Sure.
And I think there needs to be a sense that we've had a school system which has been purely focused on academic achievement, not enough on alternatives, and a parity of esteem between apprenticeships and academic, multiple pathways. And I think that there's real concrete things that need to be done. For example, the way that schools are assessed by Ofsted. It's because a lot of some of the teachers I've spoken to, when I talked about apprenticeships, they say, I agree with what you're saying, but we are still held to account by a framework that very much puts the emphasis on academic, which of course is important, and not enough reward or incentive to promote apprenticeships. I mean, I understand that may be changing with the new framework, but it's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned. Because I was at the end of Packard Avenue last Saturday at the Baptist Church at the Summer Fete, and it was incredibly, it did strike me because it was such a peaceful, friendly event. Punch and Judy going on there and everything else, and you just sit there and think about what a horrific incident that happened about a year ago, just out there, pretty much the same time as David and I was there, and it's sort of absolutely horrific. But I do think we've and something else I wanted to talk to you about is I know members of the community there, and when I went on a walkabout in Queensway. It was in winter, and I was going up to people and just talking to them and saying, how do you feel about the town? And a lot of them had lived in, multiple people I spoke to, they lived in that area their whole life, and growing up it was a safe place. They used to go out and run around, they used to go off, and the parents didn't even know about it. It was fine. They came back and said, wouldn't do that anymore. And a lot of them said it's a lack of there's less respect in kids today. And when they were growing up, we went to school and it was with the teacher, and that stopped happening. You'd never talk back to your mum, things like that, and a lack of respect. And how do we do that? How do we instill that? How do we get back to that? Is that?
Well, I mean, that's a really good point, and I absolutely agree with you. And that's a key part of our police and crime plan. That's one of the reasons I'm a Conservative, actually. It's very easy to answer, because one of the key things that drives me is respect for law and order and each other. And that's not just a throwaway remark. If you unpick that and look at it seriously, that's exactly what you're saying. And that sense of discipline with a small d, and respect for those who are older, whatever they do in society, everybody has a contribution to make, and we've lost our way, I think, with the sort of what I would call the urban liberal elite, who somehow think these things don't matter or it's unimportant. Well, that's not the way we operate in Suffolk, and it's very important we rebuild that. So the way to do that is to make sure the children are brought up knowing the difference between right and wrong. That sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed, I think, how many clearly don't have that advantage. And we've all got to work to do that. Adults, be your age, my age or older, we have to lead by example. We also have got to stop blaming the schools as a scapegoat for the statist sort of solution to everything. We can't afford it. And I mean, I think teachers, friends of mine are teachers, they spend far too much time having to discipline children to get them to do as they're asked or told, frankly. There's nothing wrong with saying, do as you're told, not as you're asked. And that's a whole societal thing. And the interesting thing about going back to the Nacton Road tragedy up there, a lot of parents of self-reflection said, we are all collectively to blame, and they're so right. We're all are. Why are we allowed it to get to this state? It shouldn't have done. So turning the clock back or making that change is going to be a challenge, but it needs to be done.
And I think it's also a role of the community. And I've spoken to a number of people from that particular community, but also there's other communities in different parts of Ipswich. they want to try and play a role themselves and try to tackle this and say, look, we've got a role here. It's not just enough for us to say, right, state needs to solve this. Yeah, it clearly has a role to play, police has a role to play, schools have a role to play, but actually the community itself. The problem is though that, I know a couple of individuals who have looked at play a role in tackling this, and the parts of the community perhaps that are part of the problem. Sometimes sometimes some of the individuals who come forward and try to tackle it have been the victim of forms of harassment as well, because it's because in some respects it's quite brave.
It is
because the vast majority of people want to live in a safe community, but actually, it can be quite difficult to put yourself forward as trying to promote that change and trying to.
It is, and I'm full of admiration for people who actually do that, because it's not easy, and that's why you need more than one person. Solutions need to come from within the community, the ideas, and it's up to those of us in the public sector, private sector, who can understand where they come from. How do we help support and enable it to happen? So that can be, and sometimes it's about funding, sometimes it's about places, sometimes it's just opportunities. If you look at, for example, work experience, well, how many local businesses, and that could be public or private sector, don't really care what, say to these people, you come and work with us for a couple of weeks or something just to get a feel for it. If we haven't got the careers advice that's been given by schools that perhaps it wasn't, or wasn't what it was like, well, why can't we find a way of doing that, having jobs fairs, but not just have one big event for the whole of Suffolk? Why don't we take it out to some of these estates and do things? Mention that Fate, well, they've got another community event coming up on September the 7th, for example, on the Saturday. Well, why don't we help make it easier? So I've always said, when working at the constabulary, if you're finding it difficult to engage with people, go out there and see them. Because they're not always going to come and see you, they might be worried, they might, so they need to be singled out. So communication works both ways, and those of us who are, I suppose, in public life, well, we've got to make the effort to go and talk with these guys. So it can be done, and I'm by nature optimistic. We're going to solve this problem.
So I'm confident as well, because I think there's a desire there within the community for change, and people, and actually in Acton Road there's been a new youth club which has been set up, and actually I think the father was involved in this, and it was on Look East. I saw it, and I saw it being launched, and so it seems that there is a real desire for change there, and I think that with the right policies, locally and nationally, we can get a grip on this, and we've got to be optimistic. We've got to try and hope and positivity. So you've been re-elected Police and Crime Commissioner now for 7 years. You're going to be standing as a Conservative candidate to be re-elected next May.
Next May, that's right.
Who knows what's going to happen in a lot of politics between now and then. When somebody asked me a couple of months down the line at the moment, I struggle to put my head around it, because I just keep on thinking to myself, what's going to happen over the next few weeks in politics.
Well, I suppose that the big issue here is, I do hope and believe we've got to leave on the 31st of October. Regardless of how people voted in the referendum, the fact is, as far as I'm concerned, and I would say this, we made a democratic decision. It is not up to Parliament or anyone else to override the will of the body politic. We all want a deal of sorts, but it's got to be the right one for them, and it's got to be the right one for us. So I think Boris has got this quite right.
Absolutely. For me, it's as you say, Parliament contracted its sovereignty to the British people on this question.
500.
We voted. It was a close, but it was a decisive outcome. We had a big national debate about it. We had very high turnout. People that I know who aren't usually political were much more aware of the arguments when it came to a referendum. When we had an outcome, Parliament spent best part of 3 years failing to implement the results. So we have to leave it in.
For example, Tom, I didn't like the fact that Tony Blair was elected, but that was a democratic result, and actually that's it. It didn't go around with rerun the election.
The interesting thing is, actually, I remember the referendum. My mother actually voted Remain and was actually quite strong in her view that was the right thing to do. However, subsequent to that, she actually voted for a Brexit party in the European elections. And her reason for doing that is she said, look, I thought we should have stayed in. I think we made a mistake not to stay in, but I care more about democracy, therefore I'm going to vote that way. And of course I disagreed with voting, you should vote for the Conservative Party, you shouldn't vote for the Brexit.
Well, I voted for the Conservative Party too, but I do understand why a lot of people I knew voted Brexit, because they are so fed up with the Conservative government not doing as they were asked to by the people.
But now with a refreshed team and a new Prime Minister who genuinely believes in Brexit, we have to look at things like the Peterborough by-election when the vote split, and of course the only thing that's going to do is help the Labour Party, so we need to get a grip on that. But in terms of looking ahead to your election next May, I guess you're probably already thinking about some of the themes you might want to be running on, highlighting? What are they?
Well, one of the big issues we've got to tackle in society, far too much work is dumped on the police because they are there as a service of last resort 24/7. I am seriously concerned about the number of missing people there are in Suffolk. Generally, many of them in the care of social services. Now, they have their own difficulties, don't get me wrong, but it cannot be right that the police have to keep going and find young people who've gone missing, some of them 30, 40, 50, even more times per year. Just as an example, I was at a public meeting down in Felixstowe yesterday, and the sergeant there said at lunchtime, in his area, there are 22 people missing. You know, in the middle of the day, in the Felixstowe area. Now, this cannot be right. We've got increasing problem, of course, with the older population dementia. Now, sadly, they're going to go walkabout sometimes. So we need a serious conversation. Whose responsibility is it? Because every time the police get involved in that, or for example, if they have to stay there when the ambulance fails to turn up, which does happen, and we're getting some work done to analyse this. For example, if the police are the first ones to arrive and put the door on if someone's in a state, and if the ambulance service knows the police are there, then they download the response. Well, we don't have the resources, and I don't see why as PCC I should be asking you and everybody else here to pay their council tax to support the ambulance service. That's their problem, not mine. I'm trying to be unreasonable about it, but sometimes it takes 5 hours of police officer sitting there waiting for an ambulance. That's over half a shift, and what are we trying to do? You know, we are not a body to do it. The mental health difficulties in the Foundation Trust problem we've got here in Suffolk and Norfolk are well known, but we are not a mental health service. So we're always there as as a service of last resort, but don't keep dumping things onto us. The Ministry of Justice with their court closures programme, that's another example of cost jumping onto the police, and I'm fed up with it. So we need a proper conversation, we need some solutions. We've all got lots of money. Whether we've got enough is debatable, but perhaps we could use the money we've got and spend it better with cooperation, collaboration, and so on. But the key to it, as I said earlier, Tom, getting this economy going, it sounds boring, but it's essential, because A, you've got to have a tax base to earn the money to pay for it.
And also getting Brexit delivered.
Get it delivered, and I think we've got a huge opportunity.
Crowding out,
So, another thing the government has failed to deliver is civil parking enforcement. It doesn't actually affect Ipswich, but it does take up police time out elsewhere in the county. If something kicks off, what's going to happen? We need to handle immigration far more effectively. Now, this is not about shutting the borders. When we do get people who arrive here, be they refugees or whatever, as long as they're here illegally, we do need to do more in integration. And the other big thing that I would like to see done is, what are we seriously going to do about stopping reoffending? When I meet young men in particular, say under the age of 30, who've been found out behind bars 7 or 8 times, it surely indicates the system isn't working. In every prison place costs £40,000 notes of yours and my money each year, and if we could stop reoffending or reduce that with jobs, employment, these sorts of things. I've employed people in that situation myself in the past, so I know we can do it. So that's a big plank of what we want to do. So it's the economy, policing is an economic driver, immigration, getting people properly integrated, organised crime groups big, and the other thing the government's got to get more serious about is fraud. That is costing UK PLC £200 billion notes a year. We're not even scratching the surface.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for coming today.
Pleasure.
I think we've sort of discussed crime issues extensively today. And it's, but no, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I share your optimism about the new Conservative government. And I'm really, it's going to be difficult, but I'm confident we can make some real progress on these issues.
And if I could just make one last comment, we're really lucky in Suffolk. Compared with other places, we still do live in a very safe county. That's not to say we haven't got challenges and problems. Of course we have.
Particularly in Ipswich.
So let's not beat ourselves up. Ipswich, I know with our new chief constable, we're going to do more about shoplifters and that low-level nuisance crime. We've got to do more about supporting the economy. We will be doing that, and that's why Boris has pledged for these extra officers and resources. We will put that to very good use here in Suffolk, and particularly in Ipswich.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Good day.
Cheers.
Pleasure.
Bye.